Anyone who has siblings knows that Peppa and George love each other a lot, but sometimes they can be really mean to each other. Do you remember all the times the Pig siblings had a huge fight or acted like bad siblings? One of the heaviest moments between the two was when Peppa was really happy and peacefully watching her favorite music video on TV, but George decided to cause trouble. The little pig grabbed the remote without asking and, very unfairly, changed the channel to put on a dinosaur show. Peppa got mad and tried to take control of the situation, but her younger brother kept arguing. Things got even worse when Daddy Pig took the remote from them and turned off the TV, saying that if they couldn't agree, then no one would watch anything. But that was super unfair because it was Peppa who was already watching her favorite music clips and George interrupted her. It was Peppa's turn to watch, but she lost her moment just because George didn't know how to listen and wait his turn for the dinosaur channel. If things keep going like this, they're definitely going to fight a lot when the new baby arrives. They'll probably argue over who gets to hold the baby first or who gets to pick the new family member's name. Good thing here on the channel we never fight, only lots of theories and fun. And you already know what to do. Grab your popcorn because another Cinewave is about to start. After the TV fight, the two siblings had another big argument over a carrot, and this time it was Peppa's fault. Maybe she wanted to get back at George for what happened before, but even so, she's the older sibling and should act more maturely. George grabbed the last carrot, but when Peppa saw how much her brother wanted it, she tried to take the food for herself too. Peppa even went as far as saying something that never happened, claiming she saw the carrot first, but that wasn't true. In the video, it's really clear that George saw the food first, but none of that mattered to Peppa because she wanted him to feel how wrong it is when someone takes something from you, just like he had with the TV remote. Mommy Pig cut the carrot into 2 pieces and gave one to each of them, but even then Peppa got mad and said George's half was bigger. Come on, Peppa! George really did grab the carrot before you. If this keeps up, the two siblings are going to be arguing over who should feed the new baby sister when she arrives. And that could be really serious because, while they argue, the little one could go hungry. But not all the fights between the siblings are bad or heavy. Some are actually pretty funny to watch. A great example happens in the episode Snow, when Peppa and George discovered it was snowing outside. It all started when Peppa was jumping on the ice and suddenly slipped. George thought it was hilarious and started laughing. Peppa got angry and said it wasn't nice to laugh at her. Everything stayed fine until Peppa decided to make a snowball and throw it at her little brother. Playing snowball fights is definitely a lot of fun, but it wouldn't be Peppa Pig without a little drama. Seeing how good George was at the game, Peppa decided to play a bit rougher and made a huge snowball. She threw the heavy snowball at George, but it hurt a lot, and the little piglet started crying. That's not the right way to play, Peppa. Peppa really needs to be more careful with her strength because when the new baby arrives, she could accidentally hurt her little sister during playtime. And who doesn't remember one of the most famous fights between the Pig siblings when Aunt Dottie sent them a gift? Peppa and George start the episode Horsey Twinkletoes playing inside their room. Peppa was happily playing with her toy tea set while George was playing with his dinosaur, but then her little brother decided to cross the room and mess up her tea party by knocking over her toys on purpose. Peppa got really angry and said one side of the room was hers and the other side was George's, but that under no circumstances was George allowed to cross the invisible line because that would break the rules. Do you prefer playing with friends or playing alone like Peppa? Drop a hashtag friends in the comments so we can get to know ya! Downstairs, the doorbell rang and a mysterious box arrived. Aunt Dottie had sent the two cousins a horse on wheels, and while we won't get into how dangerous that gift is in a place full of steep hills, we will talk about how Peppa decided to name it all by herself. The little pig chose the name Horsey Twinkletoes, while George just wanted to call it Horse. This part is really funny because the fight between the siblings sparked a trend on TikTok where people would reenact the argument but change the subtitles to create jokes. In Peppa's world, she won the argument, but honestly, she shouldn't have picked the name without asking George's opinion since the horse belonged to both of them. This makes us wonder, when the new little sister shows up in the series, will Peppa want to choose her name all by herself too, without asking George what he thinks? That wouldn't be fair at all. In the episode Castles and Houses, Peppa is playing with her brother in their grandparents' backyard. There's a little treehouse there that Grandpa Pig built for both of them, but interestingly, that day Peppa's friends wanted to play Tea Party. Susie Sheep, Rebecca Rabbit, and Zoe Zebra showed up to join Peppa. They also brought Richard, who's a friend of George's, and everything was fine until Danny Dog and Pedro Pony arrived and asked if they could come into the treehouse. Peppa wouldn't let them in, saying that the treehouse was only for girls, but the boys pointed out that George and Richard are boys too. And that's when Peppa did something really bad. She kicked George out of the treehouse, even though it was his too. At that moment, George started crying a lot, and it really was unfair to kick him out, even though it would have made sense if Peppa had just asked him to sit out for a bit while she played a game with her friends that usually only girls like to play. George didn't need to feel so sad just because of that. The real problem was that Peppa completely took over the treehouse, acting like she was the only one who owned it, and that's not cool. Will Peppa get jealous of the new baby sister when she's born? Or maybe even try to stop George from playing with her because she thinks only she can be the big sibling?
That sucks.
It's really tough being the younger and weaker sibling. In the episode Cousin Chloe, Peppa and George are playing outside in the yard. The idea was to throw the ball to each other, but George threw it in a way that Peppa couldn't catch, and then she said that made her the winner, which doesn't make any sense. Things got even worse when Peppa herself threw the ball way too hard and made George fall down. That was clearly something really rough that Peppa did, but luckily George didn't cry because Cousin Chloe was about to arrive. In this episode, the fight doesn't continue because they end up playing with their older cousin, but it's still really sad to think that when nobody's watching, Peppa treats her little brother that way. Will Peppa do the same thing to her new baby sister when no one's around? Hopefully not. When Peppa and George meet baby Alexander for the very first time, there's a moment that really shows how mean Peppa can be to George even when the adults are around. Both of them were excited to make friends with the new baby, and Peppa was super disappointed to find out he was a boy, but George wasn't. George wanted to show his dinosaur to baby Alexander. That's when the new family member started crying a lot. Peppa was very rude and cut right in front of George, saying that Alexander didn't want to play with him or his dinosaur. Maybe the baby just didn't like George's toy, but it was still really mean for Peppa to treat him that way. When the new little sister is born, Peppa might start pushing George aside, saying that the baby doesn't like dinosaurs, and stopping him from playing with the new little one in the pig family. That would be awful! You know who's never gonna leave you behind? Us, right here on the channel, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. In the episode about George's very first day at preschool, Peppa also picked a fight over George. It all starts in the pig family's car when she's feeling annoyed and asking Daddy Pig why George is going to preschool, saying that he's too little and that she just wants to play with the older kids. Right then, Peppa already showed she didn't want to share her friends. But Peppa seems to forget that when she was his age, she was in school too. Shame on you, Peppa.
I can't believe...
Still in the same episode, Peppa's meanness becomes even more obvious when she introduces her brother to her friends, but when Susie says she wishes she had a little brother, Peppa doesn't understand what her friend means because, in her opinion, having a brother isn't a good thing. When Danny shows interest in George's dinosaur, Peppa says it's just a toy dinosaur, because deep down, she doesn't really think George's love for ancient animals is anything cool. They don't fight in this scene because George still didn't know that his sister was making mean comments about him, but we know. One of the scenes where the siblings really didn't get along was when George played in the rain and caught a cold. The little piglet had a lot of fun, but once he got back home, he kept coughing a lot, and that made Peppa really annoyed because her brother even sneezed right on her face. Sure, that's really gross, but she could have been a little more patient because George didn't do it on purpose. Things got even worse when Peppa went to bed, and that's when George kept sneezing super loudly. Fighting with someone who's sick is not cool at all, but our protagonist didn't think about that. Peppa told George that he needed to sneeze a little more quietly because she wanted to sleep, but that's not fair since her little brother was sick. When George showed that he couldn't sneeze any softer, Peppa got really irritated, and even more so when George started snoring and kept her from sleeping. Honestly, they had a terrible day and an even worse night, and Peppa didn't help by making angry faces at her sick brother. What really makes everything better is knowing you can hang out with us even longer. That's why we picked out 2 more awesome videos for everyone to enjoy. We'll see you in the next one.